All right, good evening. Welcome everyone to Secrets of the Bible, Iconic Stories, Mystical Meanings, and Their Lessons for Life. We are on lesson number 3. That means this is our third week at exploring foundational and fundamental stories from the Bible. And I'm hoping that thus far, there are 2 rules that you've learned at how to look at a biblical story. These are 2 principles that we always have to have in mind every time we approach, study, or learn a segment or a section from the Bible, from the Torah. We have to have in mind these 2 questions. Question number 1 is, God created the world for a purpose. How does this story fit into the purpose for which God created the world? How does this story get in the way of or advance the purpose for which God created the world? That is question number 1. Anytime you learn a story in the Torah, what does this have to do with the purpose for creation, and how does it advance the purpose for creation? Principle and rule number 2 is that the story took place in a historical context, and we have to understand it as such. But at the same time, we have to recognize that there's an inner spiritual dynamic taking place within every story. There's a cosmic significance, there's a mystical significance, and only when we appreciate that can we have a firm grasp on the actual story, and will we know how to apply it and make it relevant to our lives. With that in mind, we're going to apply these 2 principles to story number 3, the story of Yaakov and Eisav, the battling brothers, and more specifically, the stolen blessings. Yitzchak was going to bless his son Eisav. Rivka, through deception, encourages Yaakov to steal the blessings. We're going to explore the story in 3 parts. So we're going to have 3 separate videos, and then we're going to analyze each part of the story in turn, and then go into the next one. So we begin with part 1 of the video.
After many years of barrenness, Isaac and Rebekah's prayers are answered, and Rebekah conceives. But this is no ordinary pregnancy.
The children struggled within her, and she said, "If so, why am I thus?" And she went to inquire of God. God said to her, "2 nations are in your womb, and 2 kingdoms from your insides will diverge. Kingdom will overpower kingdom, and the elder will serve the younger." Her days to give birth were fulfilled, and behold, there were twins in her womb. The first one came out ruddy, his entirety as a hairy mantle, and they called his name Esau. After that, his brother came out, and his hand was grasping Esau's heel, and he called his name Jacob. The lads grew up. Esau was a man who knows game, a man of the field, and Jacob was a wholesome man, a dweller of tents. Isaac loved Esau for the game in his mouth, and Rebekah loved Jacob.
All right, let's analyze section number 1, part number 1 of the story. Rivka gives birth to twins. Very often when twins are born, they're quite similar to each other. Now, of course, if they're identical twins, they're going to be more similar. But even fraternal twins very often are quite similar. After all, they're brothers or sisters, or brother and sister. Yet in this case, Yaakov and Eisav can't be more different than each other. Their physical appearance, they're on opposite ends of the physical perspective. Their character, their temperament, their behavior, their personality, completely different. It did not begin only from the moment that they were born, But even in the womb, it was clear the differences. What was some of the text that we just read? 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 kingdoms from your insides will diverge. Kingdom will overpower kingdom, and the elder will serve the younger. So Rivka actually gets a prophecy about the nature of her twins. And God is telling her, you are not just the mother of 2 children. The story that's taking place, the children that are going to be born from you, that are currently in your womb, this is not a personal, private affair. All of history rides on it. 2 nations will be born, 2 kingdoms will be born. They will battle each other. They will fight each other. One will be on top. The other will fail. The other will rise. The other one will be on top. This struggle, which was prophesied while Rivka was pregnant, was manifest literally from the second and the moment that Eisav and Yaakov were born. Eisav is born, and Yaakov is grabbing onto Esav's heel. He's already grabbing onto his heel, which is where Yaakov gets his name from. The Hebrew word for heel is Akev, so therefore Yaakov is named Yaakov because he was grabbing onto the heel of Eisav. The young men grow up. The Torah tells us that Eisav is a man of the field. He is a hunter. Yaakov, he is a wholesome individual. He spends his time in the tents. You cannot have people that are more different than each other. But what do their parents feel about it? How do Yitzchak and Rivka think about their twin sons? The Torah tells us that Rivka loved Yaakov, and the Torah tells us that Yitzchak loved Eisav. Why? Why was there a particular connection and love between the two? The Torah says the reason that Rivka had an affection for Yaakov is because Yaakov was a dweller of tents. Yaakov studied in the yeshiva. Yaakov was the scholar. Yaakov was the academic. Which Jewish mother do you know that would not want her son to grow up to be a scholar, to be a yeshiva bacher, to be edel, to be refined, to be sensitive, to be a mensch, to be an ethical, moral person? This is Yaakov, and Rivka, his mother, has a special love and affection for him. The Torah tells us why Yitzchak had a particular love for Eisav. It was because he had game in his mouth. What does this mean? It's a strange, unusual expression. Rashi informs us 2 interpretations. Interpretation number 1 is that literally he had game in his mouth. That Eisav would go out, he would hunt, he would bring back and prepare the most wonderful and delicious foods for Yitzchak. So there was a bond and there was a connection. However, Rashi says there's another reason. The other potential interpretation is the word for game in Hebrew is tzayid, which means to trap. That Eisav would trap his father with his mouth. In other words, he would speak to him in such a way that made Yitzchak feel that his son Eisav was refined, sensitive, wholesome, cared about Torah and mitzvahs, while the reality is totally opposite, and Eisav was perpetrating a tremendous fraud on his father. The fact that Rivka had a unique relationship with Yaakov and that Yitzchak had a unique relationship with Eisav, that played a big role in the episode of the stealing of the blessings. Now we are ready for part number 2. Any questions on what we've done so far? All right, Phil, looks like you got a question. You just got to unmute yourself. Yes.
Yeah, it takes a few seconds to do that.
No problem.
So you talked about Jacob learning in yeshivas. Were there yeshivas at that time, or was he just learning at home?
There absolutely were yeshivas at that time. It says that he spent 14 years in the yeshiva of Shem and Aver. It's a very important principle that God would not create a world without telling the inhabitants of the purpose for which he was created and share with them the approach to live a true, meaningful life. So there absolutely were yeshivas that a person can study and learn. They did not have the Torah in the format that we have now. They don't have the physical mitzvahs that they had now, but there absolutely was Torah that can be studied. And Yaakov took advantage of all of that and studied Torah absolutely. Let's go now to part 2 of the story.
It came to pass when Isaac was old and his eyes were dimmed of sight, and he called his elder son Esau, and he said to him, "Here, please, I have grown old. I do not know the day of my death. Now, please, pick up your implement, your sword and your bow, and go out to the field and trap game for me. Make for me delicious food such as I love, and bring it to me, and I will eat, in order that my soul should bless you before I die." Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau, and Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Listen to my voice, to that which I am commanding you. Go now to the flock and take for me from there 2 goodly goat kids, and I will prepare them as delicious food for your father, such as he loves. You will bring to your father, and he will eat, in order that he should bless you before his death." Jacob said to his mother Rebekah, "Here, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I will be in his eyes as a trickster, and I will bring upon myself a curse and not a blessing." And his mother said to him, "Your curse is upon me, my son. Only listen to my voice and go take for me." Rebekah took the desirable garments of her elder son Esau, and she dressed her younger son Jacob. And she dressed the goat kid skins on his hands and upon the smoothness of his neck. He came to his father, and he said, "Who are you, my son?" And Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn." Isaac said to Jacob, "Please approach, and I will feel you, my son. Are you this, my son, Esau, or not?" Jacob approached his father Isaac, and he felt him, and he said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, and the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, for his hands were as the hands of his brother Esau, hairy, and he blessed him. "God shall give to you of the dew of the heavens, and the fat of the earth, and an abundance of grain and wine. Nations will serve you, and kingdoms will bow to you. You shall be a master over your brothers, and your mother's son shall bow to you. Those who curse you shall be cursed, and those who bless you shall be blessed."
All right, now that we've watched the first 2 parts of the story, we will begin to really get into the story in depth. Now, there are so many questions that a person can ask about the story. This is one of those stories that really screams, it calls out, there's got to be something more to this. There's got to be an inner dynamic, a spiritual thing. There's some mystical significance to what's going on. There just has to be. We're going to look at 5 questions tonight. Question number 1. What is the deeper meaning of the 2 kingdoms? What are they fighting for? Right? We have a story where Rivka's pregnant. The fetuses are fighting within the womb. And the prophecy is these are not 2 kids who are going to fight each other. There's not just a sibling rivalry. We're talking about 2 kingdoms who will fight for our eternity. Who are these kingdoms, and what exactly are they fighting about? Question number 2. If Yaakov is supposed to lead, why is Eisav the elder? What does the prophecy say? The prophecy says the elder will serve the younger. So Yaakov is going to be the leader. If that's the case, why isn't Yaakov just born first? He's the firstborn. He's the leader. Everything sails smoothly after that. Why is Eisav the first, and then Yaakov has to chase after him and they have to battle each other throughout their whole lives? Question number 3. Why did Yitzchak prefer materialistic Eisav over spiritual Yaakov, while Rivka saw it the opposite way? Eisav is the villain in the story. Eisav was a bad guy. He was a bad man. How could it be that Yitzchak could be fooled by Eisav and have this affection and love and desire to bless him in such a beautiful way? Rivka saw it clear. Rivka understood what was going on. How come Rivka saw it, but Yitzchak was not able to? Question number 4. Why does the preparation of tasty food obtained from the field play such an important role in the story? Kind of strange. I don't know if you noticed this point. Why is Yitzchak interested in food? If Yitzchak wants to bless his son, Eisav, bless his son. What's holding you back? Why the delay? What's he interested in? He wants a delicious meal. Like, that's just weird. To try to contemporize this a little bit. The Lubavitcher Rebbe would lead Farbrengens. He would distribute dollars. There was never a point in time where the Rebbe said, yeah, we're going to deliver dollars shortly, but before you come, I need a nice steak with mashed potatoes. It would be like the weirdest thing possible. Yet Yitzchak, before he can bless, he requires tasty food. That is an important part, so much so that in order for Yaakov to get the blessings, he had to bring his own tasty, delicious, prepared food for Yitzchak. So what's going on? Finally, question number 5. Why did the blessings have to be obtained by means of deception? Most people who read the story, no matter what commentaries they read, are left with an uncomfortable feeling about the degree and the level of deception that took place amongst people who are supposed to be our patriarchs and our matriarchs. Why did the blessings have to be delivered and given through a deceptive process? These are the 5 questions. We are going to answer them one at a time. We don't always answer them in order, but we will get to every single question. But I have to warn you in advance, there is the possibility that we go overtime tonight. There's a lot of material, and it's all so insightful and informative that you want to be there for all of it. But I will try to do my best that we don't go too long. So let's begin with question number 1. There is a prophecy that Rivka is going to give birth to 2 kingdoms, 2 nations. Her pregnancy is not just related to her own children. They're not just brothers, but all of the future, all of our history is going to be shaped by it, because these twins, Yaakov and Eisav, they represent 2 forces that manifest and express themselves in life in various ways. We're going to explore 4 different ways on how Yaakov and Eisav are present in our life today. For this, you need to open your book to page 83. There is a chart there. It's called Figure 3.1, and it is not on the board. It's not in the PowerPoint, so you got to look in your book to fully appreciate the chart. Actually, some of it will be on the PowerPoint. We're going to look at 4 different ways that Yaakov and Eisav manifest themselves in life. Category number 1 is in history. How do Yaakov and Eisav influence and direct history itself? Second, we're going to look at daily life. What is the orientation, the Yaakov orientation and the Eisav orientation in daily life? Third, we're going to look at how Yaakov and Eisav manifest itself in our own personal existence and in our own inner struggle. And finally, we're going to explore Yaakov and Eisav from a cosmic perspective. Let's go for the chart. All right, so the chart tells us that Eisav, in terms of world history, represents Rome and Western civilization. Eisav, in terms of our orientation in life, an orientation towards materialism. Eisav represents, in terms of our own internal struggle, self-realization, self-preservation, self-gratification, in other words, the animal soul. On a cosmic level, Eisav represents the spiritual energy of Tohu. We'll explain Tohu in great detail later in the class. Yaakov, on a historical scene, of course, he represents Judea, the influence of Judea, the Jewish people, on all of civilization. The orientation of Yaakov towards the world is a spiritual orientation. The inner struggle that's represented by Yaakov is the desire for self-transcendence, selflessness, egoless, to live a life of purpose and meaning. On a cosmic perspective, he is all about the spiritual energy of Tikkun, and now we will go through each one of them one at a time. So we begin with this idea that there are two forces that affect and influence all of history. They can be divided into Rome, Western civilization, and the Jewish people. The interaction between the Jewish people and Rome begins 100 years before the Common Era, where Rome conquers the land of Israel. The Jewish people lose their independence. Israel is no longer an independent Jewish state. It was under the control of the Hashmonaim, the kings that were from the family of the Maccabees, and the whole story of Hanukkah. So the battle begins 100 years BCE, where Rome physically conquers and takes over the land of Israel. There is a series of rebellions. These rebellions are all essentially crushed by the Romans. They destroy the Beis Hamikdash. They exile much of the Jewish people. They murder and sell into slaves as the rest. And there's incredible religious oppression and persecution by the Romans. If you look at the history between the West, Rome, and the Jewish people, the struggle seems very unequal. Rome is a powerful army, a powerful political force, which morphs into the ideas behind Western civilization, the most dominant force in the world today. Who are the Jewish people? The Jewish people are a tiny nation that's scattered all over the world, that has been chased down with crusades, with expulsions, with inquisitions, with pogroms, with holocausts. We've been scattered and homeless for much of the past 2,000 years. So 2,000 years ago, the Jews were physically defeated and scattered. On the other hand, the population number and the power that we have doesn't tell the whole story, because 2,000 years we're still here. And you can make quite the strong argument that Jewish ideas and Jewish values have a huge impact in the society that we live in today. They may not be Western values per se, but Jewish ideas have influenced and shaped and impacted Western culture and civilization tremendously. Who will win? The Jewish approach to life, the Roman approach to life? We're still battling and struggling with that today. On page 84 in your book, there are some questions. What influence of historical Rome can you identify in American society today? Think about what are Western values that flow through American life and society today. What would you say they are? Let's see if we have this here. Okay. Any thoughts, an idea of what is a Western value? Yes, Phil?
Well, they had the Senate, and we have the Senate. So it's a type of governance. And of course, we still have Roman numerals in our vocabulary.
So definitely Rome and the Jewish people had a similarity in the sense of the Senate, the desire to pursue law and order, absolutely. But the way that I would characterize the West is a quest for power, technology, and entertainment. These are ideas which are very different than the Jewish ideas or even Eastern ideas. This is all about self-aggrandizement, the love of luxury, the bigger is better mentality, mansions, skyscrapers, architecture. These are all things that characterize the West. A typical kid growing up in the West today is immersed in a life. You need to have the best college degree in order that you can make the most money, in order that you're going to be able to secure the greatest possible entertainment in your life. The Western mentality is job, money, status, power, entertainment. But you could argue that those are Western values. What are Jewish values? Jewish values are belief in God, right? That has to do with morality, social justice. We're here for a reason. We're created for a purpose. It's not only about ourselves and pursuing our own goal. Jewish values are self-discipline, generosity, responsibility, the pursuit of peace. This is a very different orientation. The Jewish orientation is grow up to be a mensch, to be a good person, someone who's kind, care about people who are less fortunate than you. This is the Jewish mentality. This is the Jewish mindset. So have the Jewish people had an influence on society? I would say absolutely. There is a constant struggle within the world for which approach to life is more dominant. The Eisav approach, the Yaakov approach, the Roman Western approach, or the Jewish approach. So this is one way of appreciating the two kingdoms that are battling with each other. Now let's go to the second category. How do Yaakov and Eisav manifest themselves in our daily life? What does it mean to live as an individual with a Yaakov orientation or an Eisav orientation? Yaakov and Eisav represent two worldviews. These two worldviews are depicted beautifully in Yitzchak's declaration to Yaakov in the middle of their conversation. Yitzchak declares, the voice is the voice of Yaakov and the hands are the hands of Eisav. What does he mean by this? The straightforward interpretation of these verses is Yaakov was dressed up to look like Eisav. Yitzchak was blind. How does he interact with Yaakov? By touch and by hearing. So Yitzchak marvels, he says, the voice that I hear is Yaakov's, but the hands that I'm touching, they physically feel and give this sensation of Eisav. However, the Medrash says there's a lot more going on in the story. Text number 3, Karen Melton, please, page 85. Would you like to read?
Sure.
All right, fabulous.
2 legacies did Isaac bequeath to his 2 sons. To Jacob he gave the voice, as it is written, the voice is the voice of Jacob. And to Esau he gave the hands, as it is written, and the hands are the hands of Esau.
So the Medrash tells us that the voice is the voice of Yaakov and the hands are the hands of Eisav are not just Yitzchak's commentary on how Yaakov presented himself, but rather these are defining character traits. These are defining character traits. Eisav can be defined by his hands. Yaakov can be defined by the voice. And this represents 2 different orientations. Eisav is defined by the hands, the physical, the material. What does that mean? The orientation of Eisav means if I can touch it, if I can see it, if I can engage with it with my senses, then it's real. I live in the world of the physical, the material, money. Spiritual, abstract, that's fantasy land, right? Eisav lives in the world of the hands, that which you can touch, that which you can grasp, that which you can pursue. Eisav represents a material orientation, doesn't know about spiritual, doesn't have anything to do with spiritual, does not relate to him at all. Everything else is meaningless. Yaakov, however, inherits the orientation of the voice. What does the voice represent? That which is non-tangible and concrete, but that which is spiritual in nature. So what does Yaakov value? Ideas, feelings, values, the spiritual element and experiences of life. The physical, the material, it doesn't interest him, it doesn't attract him, it's not relevant to the Yaakov way of life. So the battle, the struggle between Yaakov and Eisav in terms of our personal orientation is the struggle that we all deal with. Is our life going to be oriented towards the material, or is our life going to be oriented towards the spiritual? Next, we move on to the internal struggle that we manifest as Yaakov and Eisav. So anyone who's taken any of the various Tanya classes that we've had in the past, we know that there is a struggle between the animal soul and the godly soul. Within each and every one of us, there are two souls that are battling for dominance. One is the animal soul, one is the godly soul. What is the animal soul all about? The animal soul's drive is for self-fulfillment. It's about self-preservation, and it's about self-gratification. That's its focus, that's its orientation, that's its motivation. What does it care about? Self-gratification and self-preservation. Then there is the Yaakov element that exists within us, which is the godly soul. The godly soul is exactly the opposite. It's not about the self. Its desire is to escape the confines of the ego. The godly soul is about selflessness. It's about living a life that's full of purpose. And this is the inner struggle that we have today. The struggle that Rivka had in her womb 3,500 years ago of Yaakov and Eisav battling and fighting with each other. This represents two nations, two kingdoms that will battle within all of history. Rome, the West, versus Jewish values. We have the orientation of materialism versus spirituality, the godly soul versus the animal soul. And now we're ready to move on to what we're going to spend the rest of the class on, the cosmic, the Kabbalistic significance of the battle between Yaakov and Eisav. The Kabbalah teaches us that Yaakov and Eisav are the physical manifestations of a spiritual energy called Tohu and Tikkun. The literal translation of Tohu and Tikkun is a world of chaos. Tikkun is a world of rectification. We are going to define these two terms more clearly as we develop the class. This is what Kabbalah teaches. God wanted to create a world because he wanted to have a relationship with us. The first world that God created was a world that was dominated by the spiritual energy that is called Tohu, which means a world of chaos. It didn't work. It didn't work. It broke. It shattered. And God created a world number two, that's our world, the one that we live in, that's called the world of Tikkun, the world of rectification, because this world works. This world functions. And the sum of the world of Tohu, with shattered and broke, became embedded in our world of Tikkun. So this is the Kabbalistic story which we now need to expand upon and explain and appreciate. What's the process? God creates the world with the energy of chaos, of Tohu. It doesn't work, it shatters. Therefore, he creates the world, which is the one that we live in. It's the world of Tikkun, the world of rectification. It's the world that works. Embedded within this world are pieces, are shards of the world of Tohu. Before we define Tohu and Tikkun, there's a very important note that we have to appreciate and understand. That's the foundation of understanding Tohu and Tikkun. So far, we have been defining Yaakov and Eisav in terms of bad and good. Yaakov is good, Eisav is bad. Therefore, Rome, Western civilization, would be considered bad in the sense that it's the opposite of Jewish values. Eisav represents the approach of materialism, which is bad. The animal soul, which can be viewed as bad. Yaakov, on the other hand, is everything good. He represents Jewish values. He represents a life that's oriented towards spirituality. He represents a life that is dominated by the animal soul's desire for selflessness and for purpose in life. However, when we talk about tohu and tikkun, they are not good and bad. One is not good, the other is not bad. Rather, they are different. Each one has a pro and a con. Each one has a positive and has a positive advantage, and each one has a disadvantage. It's all about how tohu is applied, and it's all about how tikkun is applied. So with this introduction, we will explore tohu and tikkun with that in mind, that there is a wealth of information in Kabbalistic literature about tohu and tikkun. We're just scratching the surface of what they mean tonight, because we need to understand how it directly influences the story of Yaakov, Yitzchak, and the blessings. So we're going to go to text number 4. I'm going to read text number 4 because it's a Kabbalistic text. It doesn't flow very easily. We will not understand it, but we're going to need to analyze it. So text number 4, page 86. This is authored by Rabbi Dov Ber of Lubavitch, the second Rebbe of Chabad. He writes, to understand the root of the differences between tohu and tikkun, and how tikkun comes to rectify and refine tohu, serving as a form to its substance. As is known, the lights of tohu were extremely powerful and intense, as there prevailed a state of abundant light and scant vessels. Because the vessels were unable to contain the light, they shattered and fell. Following that, the tikkun reality was made with scant light and abundant vessels, with the result that the lights are sustained within the vessels. Now, did any of you understand that? That was kind of like reading some calculus and trigonometry over there. What on earth did that mean? Let's go through it step by step. In the text, the Rebbe Rashab explained to us that all of life consists of light and vessels. That's what life consists of. Tohu has more light than vessels. Tikkun has more vessels than light. What on earth does that mean? So let's define light and vessel. Light represents the essence of something. The vessel represents the structure of something. Now you're looking at this and you might think I'm crazy, but I assure you this is quite easy to understand. Figure 3.2 in your book. Open up your book to page 87. We're going to go through 5 examples of light and vessels that will ensure that you understand this just like you understand 2 + 2 is 4. You're going to understand the Kabbalistic idea of light and vessels. Here we have the example of a book. The light of the book is the ideas that are found in the book. The vessel of the book, those are the words which actually make up the ideas. Makes sense, right? The light and the vessel, the ideas and the words. Next, we go to a melody of music. The light of the music is the emotional experience that the music represents. The vessel for the music is the actual notes of the music. Let's go to a business, a very concrete example. The light of the business is the vision, the objective, the goal for which the business exists. The vessel is the actual business strategy to implement those visions and objectives. In a relationship, the light is the love. That's the glue that brings the people together. What's the vessel? It's mutually supportive actions. It's the behaviors that each party shows towards each other that is the vessel for the love. And finally, when it comes to religion, A religion has certain beliefs and values, and has a theology. The vessel for those beliefs, values, and theologies are the rituals and customs of that religion. So everything in life consists of and is combined of light and vessels. And we gave 5 beautiful examples, and we could understand quite easily one without the other is simply not going to exist. A book that has a lot of words, but those words do not contain an idea, that's not a book. That's just a bunch of gibberish. A person who has an idea but has no words, that's also not a book. That's just an idea. The same thing would apply to a business. If a person has a vision and an objective, but no business plan, you don't have a business. If a person's in a relationship and there's love, but there's no supportive actions that reflect that, there's also not going to be any relationship at all. So they have to work together. Light needs vessels, vessels need light. However, they don't get along with each other, right? Because each one has a different goal and a different perspective. Okay, so now that we have established that everything in creation is a combination of light and vessels, and we gave 5 examples so we have a real solid understanding of what light is and what vessels are and how they need to work together, we can look at the worlds of Tohu and the world of Tikkun. The issue with the world of Tohu and the Tikkun is the ratio between the light and the vessels. The world of Tohu has too much light, not enough vessels. The world of Tikkun has a lot of vessels without that much light. Now let's look at the pros and the cons of each of these 2 worlds. In the world of Tikkun, there's not that much light, but there's a lot of vessels. What is the advantage to this arrangement? The advantage is it's harmonious. It works. Think of it in terms of a book. There's plenty of words to relay and to convey the idea that you want to express. Have you ever read a book and you cannot figure out what's going on? That means way too much idea, not enough words. The world of Tikkun, it works. That is our world, right? In the world of Tikkun, there's no ego, there's no selfishness. Everything is clear, it's harmonious. Because you have enough vessels that are going to make sure that the light is utilized properly. This is the advantage of the world of Tikkun. However, there's a disadvantage of the world of Tikkun as well, which is it lacks passion. The world of Tikkun, for all intents and purposes, it's boring, it's predictable, it's like on cruise control. Are you familiar with the acronym TDLR? Have you ever heard of that before? TDLR, it's a pretty common acronym on social media. It stands for too long didn't read, right? TLDR, too long didn't read. There are people who can't take things that are too long to read. Too much vessels is just boring. It's not exciting. It's not jumping off the page. So the world of Tikkun, the positive, it works. It's harmonious. There's no ego, there's no battle, there's no struggle. The disadvantage, it lacks passion. It's a little boring. It's a little predictable. It's a little ordinary. The trains run on time and go the same speed every single day in the world of Tikkun. What about the world of Tohu? The world of Tohu is a world of abundant light and scant vessels. That means the light is overflowing the vessels cannot contain it. This represents a personality which is impulsive. The focus is on the short term versus the long term. What is the benefit of that? What are the advantages of the world of Tohu? Passion, excitement, enthusiasm. There's energy. There's the ability to jump leaps and bounds. We're not talking about a train that goes the same 40 miles an hour every day. a high-speed train that is constantly pushing the boundaries, pushing the barriers, speeding down the track at full speed. The advantages of the world of tohu, it represents ambition, being dynamic, being innovative, the constant desire for more, the ability to overcome all limitations and constraints. That's the positive of the world of tohu. What is the disadvantage of the world of tohu? It's unstable. There's no discipline, there's no focus, there's going to be conflict, and there's going to be strife. So we have tohu and we have tikkun. Neither one is good or bad. They represent two different energies in life. Tikkun, it works, it's orderly, it's harmonious, but it's a little boring, right? Tohu, it's passionate, right? It's ambitious, it's innovative, it's unpredictable. The disadvantage is that it can be unstable, it can be unpredictable, and there could be strife and struggle. The dangers of tohu, of course, are more than the dangers of tikkun. When tohu works, you're on top of the world. But when tohu breaks down, the entire system breaks down. Look at the examples that we gave before. Think about love. If a person has a fiery and passionate love for another person, but they don't demonstrate that love with supportive actions, they're never home. They're not on time. They're not respectful. They don't do the chores around the house. There's no relationship. It's going to be a disaster. It's going to collapse. Imagine a person who has a business, the most wonderful idea, the most creative, unique idea. But if there's no business plan, if you're completely all about tohu, it's going nowhere. It's not going to be successful at all. It's just not going to work. As wonderful as tohu can be, if tohu is abused, the result is disaster. It's going to collapse because there is no structure. But tohu has another problem. Number one, when tohu doesn't work, it could collapse. But even worse, if tohu doesn't work, it can survive. But it survives in the opposite way that it was meant to be. A marriage that is full of love, but doesn't have the matching actions of support, will turn into a marriage that's full of hate, animosity, and anger. The marriage might survive, but it's a marriage that's full of poison. Think about a business. A person might have a business that's full of tohu, passion, energy, enthusiasm. But if you don't have the structure to make it work, it may actually do the opposite of the goal of the business. Think about it when it comes to a religion. A religion may have beautiful ideas, but without a structure to implement those ideas, it can be abused, it could become dangerous, it could be turned into a cult, it could get incredibly violent. So tohu absolutely has a downside to it. So now that we have learned about a tikkun approach to life, and there's a tohu approach to life, God wants to create a world. The purpose of his creating a world is in order to be in a relationship with us. Which of these two models would you utilize to create a successful world? I'm imagining that you're thinking tikkun is probably the best way to go about creating a world. But that's not what happened. We are told that God utilized both. He created the world with tohu. That collapsed. It had no structure. So God had to create the world a second time. And it's the world of tohu. But it's not only the world of tohu. There are pieces and shards of the fallen world of tikkun that are embedded into this world. So the question, of course, that we are asking, why was tohu created if it was prone to failure? This question is similar to the previous lessons. If the world after eating from the tree of knowledge is the one that we're going to live in, why did God create the Garden of Eden? If the world after the flood is the one that we're going to live in, why did God create the pre-flood world? Similarly, we were extending this question, why was Tohu created if it was prone to failure? The answer is because in our world, we need to utilize the advantages of both models. It's critical that we implement both models. Tikkun works. Tikkun is productive. Tikkun is on time, right? Tikkun is the world that works. But we have to be productive with the passion, the energy, the enthusiasm of the world of Tohu as well. They have to work together. And in fact, this is what makes people so interesting. Avi, why are people so interesting? Because we have both. There's a part of us that is functional, that works, that's ordinary and normal. And then there's a part of us that's unique and quirky and unpredictable and different. And that's what makes each and every one of us interesting and unique. The personalities that we have. Okay, so we have the Yaakov and Eisav approach. Eisav represents the energy of Tohu, passion, enthusiasm, overcoming boundaries, materialism. Those all line up with the pursuits and the attitude of Rome, materialism, self-realization. The approach and the attitude of tikkun, orderliness, discipline, spirituality. That's Jewish values, spirituality, self-transcendence, and tikkun. Now I ask you the question, which of these two forces is more powerful? Which of these two are stronger in your life? The answer, I think, is quite clear, that it's the forces of Tohu. Tohu represents passion, power, enthusiasm. Tohu is a powerful drive. If you look in terms of Yaakov versus Eisav, Eisav is the one who conquered the land of Israel, destroyed the base of Mikdash, and exiled the Jews. The Jews are the tiny nation that's spread out and scattered in the world. The drive that people have to pursue the material is much stronger than the spiritual. What motivates people? Power, fame, and wealth. Those are the biggest motivating factors. The desire for self-preservation and self-gratification are absolutely the biggest motivators in life. Why is that the case? Right? How does that work? It's because Tohu was created first. In the process which God created the world, Tohu was world number one. There is a principle, the higher something is, the lower it falls. Tohu represents the most powerful spiritual energy, enthusiasm, passion, excitement, the best of the best. Because it originated in the highest world, it falls to the lowest. And therefore, Tohu often manifests itself in the most unhealthy and challenging ways. Western values, materialism, and selfishness. Therefore, the Jacob in our life faces a literal uphill battle, because it's not just that we have to deal with human nature, which is more to the Eisav side, but rather the energy of Eisav, which is Tohu, is in fact more powerful and passionate than the energy of the world of Tikkun. So now we begin to answer question number 2. Why wasn't Yaakov born first? If Yaakov was meant to be the leader, why was it that Eisav was born first, right? Why wasn't Yaakov born first? What is the answer to the question? The answer to the question is Yaakov and Eisav's birth is a reflection of the spiritual world of Tohu and Tikkun. Tohu comes first. It's uncontrollable. It's uncontainable. Second comes the world of tikkun. The world of tikkun is organized. The world of tikkun is harmonious. It's productive. And we need to utilize as well the shards of tohu, energy and passion, within the structure of the world that we live in today. Any questions before we continue on to part 3 of the story?
Yeah, in the very beginning, 2 items. Is according to the teachings over the years, do we believe that Jacob really didn't know that he was dealing with Eisav instead of Yaakov? Hard to believe. And second of all, the basis of this whole Yaakov, which is the good guy, is deception, theft, not nice at all. That doesn't sound good for the whole basis of everything that we consider holy.
So both of your questions are what we're going to address in section number 3. So you are exactly on point. Your questions we address now. Here is part number 3 of the story.
And it was, just as Jacob was going out from the presence of his father, that his brother Esau came from his hunt. And he said to his father, "My father should get up and eat of the game of his son, in order that your soul should bless me." And his father Isaac said to him, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am your firstborn son Esau." Isaac trembled an exceedingly great trembling, and he said, "Who then is the one who trapped game and brought it to me? And I ate of it all before you had come, and I blessed him. Also blessed shall he be." As Esau heard the words of his father, he cried an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and he said to his father, "Bless me too, my father." And he said, "Your brother came with cunning and took your blessing." And he said, "Is this why his name was called Jacob? Twice he has deceived me. He took my birthright, and here now he has taken my blessing." And he said, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Isaac answered and said to Esau, "Here I have placed him master to you, and all his brothers I have given to him as servants. And with grain and wine I have supported him. And for you, then, what shall I do, my son?" And Esau said to his father, "Have you only one blessing, my father? Bless me, also me, my father." And Esau raised his voice, and he wept. And his father Isaac answered, and he said to him, "Here, the fat of the land will be your settlement, and of the dew of the heavens above. By your sword you will live, and your brother you will serve. And it will be that when you are aggrieved, you will cast off his yoke from upon your neck."
Rebekah finds out that Esau is so angry over having been cheated out of the blessings that he is plotting to kill Jacob. So she convinces Isaac that it is time for Jacob to travel to her hometown, Haran, to find a wife.
Isaac called Jacob, and he blessed him, and he instructed him, and he said to him, "Arise, and go to Paddan Aram, and take yourself a wife from there, from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. And the Almighty God will bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, and you will become a community of peoples. And he will grant you the blessing of Abraham to you, and to your seed with you, to inherit you the land of your dwelling, which God has given to Abraham."
So once again, we're going to see that the key to understanding this whole story is recognizing Eisav is tohu and Yaakov is tikkun. And we're told that they're going to battle each other, they're going to fight each other for all of history. The
May I
question
ask-
is, yes.
I'm sorry. May I ask a question, or do you want me
Yes,
to wait?
you can ask a question.
So I understand you're talking on a higher level than the question I'm going to ask. But as a mother, I don't understand how the children could be divided so much, and how the father could only love one son and the mother only love one son. And so when Esau is begging his father for a blessing, I don't understand why Isaac doesn't have one to give.
Right, all great questions. How can children be so divided from one family? So I can tell you that I have seen in my own life two brothers who are on the opposite end of the spectrum as you could possibly imagine. I have seen it in the real world. It happens. In terms of how parents can only love one child and not the other. So if I gave off that impression, I apologize. Yitzchak, as a father, absolutely loved his son Yaakov. Rivka, as a mother, absolutely had tremendous love for Eisav. However, Rivka had a particular insight and connection with Yaakov, and that plays itself out in the story of the blessings, while Yitzchak had a particular relationship and insight into Eisav, which played itself out in the story of the blessings. And it ultimately comes down to Tohu and Tikkun. Neither of them are bad. They're both positive forces. They both have advantages and they both have disadvantages. Why do they have to be battling? Why do Yaakov and Eisav have to be fighting? Why do these have to be competing ideologies? Why can't they coexist? Why can't Tohu do its thing? Why can't Yaakov just do its thing? This is where we get into the conflict between Yitzchak and Rivka. Yitzchak wanted to bless Eisav. Yitzchak wanted to bless Tohu. Conventional wisdom presents this as a story of Yitzchak loving Eisav. If Yitzchak got his way and Rivka did not intervene, Eisav would have received the blessing from Yitzchak, and our patriarchs would have been Abraham, Yitzchak, and Eisav. If Rivka did not intervene, Yitzchak was blessing Eisav. The patriarchs are Abraham, Yitzchak, and Eisav. However, if you analyze the text, that is absolutely not the case at all. What happens? Let's break down the story. Yitzchak gives a blessing to Yaakov. The blessing that Yitzchak gives to Yaakov is tremendous material blessing. The entire text of the blessing that Yitzchak gives to Yaakov is all about physical, material success, blessings, and bounties. When Yitzchak discovers that he was deceived, that he did not give the blessing to Eisav, he gave it to Yaakov, he trembles. That's his reaction. And he says, Yaakov too is blessed. That means I have a blessing that's reserved for Eisav, and I have a blessing that's reserved for Yaakov. Yaakov, I was going to give you a blessing, but you took Esav's blessing. And Eisav freaks out, right? Eisav goes crazy. And he says, Dad, don't you have a blessing for me? And Yitzchak says to him, I gave the blessing to Eisav. But he's like, come on, I'm your son. Don't you love me too? Can't you give me a blessing? So Yitzchak says, of course, I have a blessing for you. What is his blessing? It's a lesser material blessing. He essentially says that Eisav is going to be under the thumb of Yaakov, but when Yaakov misbehaves, Eisav will be able to rise again and overpower Eisav. What do we see from here? So what happens immediately after that? Yitzchak gives Yaakov another blessing. What is the blessing that Yitzchak now gives Yaakov? He gives him the blessing that he is going to carry on the legacy of Abraham. What we see from this is that there were actually two separate blessings. There was one blessing that Yitzchak had in mind that was material, that was physical in nature, and that was reserved for Eisav. There was a separate blessing that was for Yaakov. That was a spiritual blessing, and that had to do with continuing the legacy of Abraham. So Eisav never had a chance. He was never going to be replacing at all. Right? The material blessing was intended for Eisav. This helps us understand question number 3. Question number 3 was, how could Yitzchak be so foolish to want to give the blessing to Eisav? Why not to Yaakov? How does it make any sense? Only Rivka knows to give it to Yaakov? The answer is very simple. Yitzchak was blind. Yitzchak was blind. That means he did not see that Eisav was a bad guy. He did not see that Eisav was a murderer and a rapist and a thief. He was blind. The Torah tells us he was blind. What did Yitzchak know? Yitzchak knew that Eisav represented the spiritual energy of Tohu. Tohu is more powerful than Tikkun. Tohu is superior. It's passion, it's energy, it's enthusiasm. It represents a drive to overcome any limitations. What did he want? What was his plan? He wanted and desired to give the blessings to Eisav. Let Yaakov get his blessing. Let Eisav get his blessing. What did Yitzchak want? He wanted to give each child the resources they need to fulfill their role. Remember what I said, Tohu is not bad, Tikkun is not good. They both represent different energies. Yitzchak says, Eisav is Tohu, I'll give him a blessing to be successful in the realm of Tohu, in the realm of the material. I will give Yaakov his blessing, he's Tikkun. I'll give him a blessing to grow and to develop in the world of the spiritual. Sounds fabulous, right? Sounds like a great idea. What was Yitzchak's plan? Eisav will have material blessings. What does that mean? With the energy of Tohu, you know what you can do? You can build a civilization. Build a world, construction, architecture, different fields, different professions. That's what the world of Tohu is good at building. Yitzchak will bless Eisav. Build the world, build a civilization, I grant you material blessings. But that's not a job for a nice Jewish boy like Yaakov. Yaakov doesn't work construction, right? That's not Yaakov's thing. Yaakov gets the spiritual blessing. He learns in the yeshiva. He develops selflessness, spirituality, and so on. This is Yitzchak's plan. This is what Yitzchak wanted. Now we can understand question number 4. What was question number 4? Question number 4 was, what is the deal with the food? Yitzchak says, Eisav, when am I going to give you blessings? When you go hunting and bring me a delicious food. How does that even make any sense? But Avi, what is a hunter? A hunter goes out into the world. He conquers the physical and the material in its raw resources, and he transforms it and makes it into something that is delicious. What is the inner meaning of this? Eisav is supposed to build a material world and transform that material world, which is raw, and turn it into something which is spiritually delicious. That is the goal. Eisav is the ultimate hunter. Take the raw material, make it delicious. Take the raw physical material world and make it spiritually delicious. Eisav was to transform the raw resources into delicious foods. The only way that Yaakov is going to be able to get those blessings is to mimic Yaakov, to mimic Eisav. The blessing is physical and material in order that you could transform it into the spiritual. The only way Yaakov was going to get it is if he was able to convince Yitzchak that he was Eisav. He had to convince Yitzchak that he was the one who was going to go out into the physical and material world and make that delicious and make that spiritually delicious. Therefore, he had to put on Esav's clothing, and therefore he had to put on this Therefore, he had to put on the clothes of Eisav, and he had to bring the delicious food as well. Now, what would have happened if none of this took place? What would have happened if Eisav got his physical and material blessing, and Yaakov would have got his blessing? Here we go to text number 6, page 93. Phil, would you like to read this text, page 93?
Okay, Jacob is the realm of holiness. Without all of this, he still would have received all the supernal energies. But the first set of blessings granted him an increased powers from the highest levels to obtain much grain and wine, referring to the laws and stories of the Torah that became embodied in material garments and in the action of the mitzvot. However, had Jacob not received these blessings, the power would have extended only to the spiritual realm. Yes, got it.
So if Yaakov would not have received the blessings, there would be this tremendous power differential and dynamic. There would be a religion, there would be ideas, there would be an element of spirituality, but we would not be able to influence the physical and material world. Because of the fact that Yaakov received the blessing that was meant for Eisav, therefore the Torah is able to have an influence over the physical world itself. Rivka is the hero of the story. Rivka intervenes. Rivka breaks up and destroys the plan. Why? What is Rivka's problem? What would be such a big issue for Eisav to receive the material blessing and do his thing, and for Yaakov to get the spiritual blessing and to do his thing? The answer is beautiful and profound. The Tohu model of life, the Eisav model of life, it only works in the Garden of Eden. It only works in a spiritual utopia. It only works if Eisav is not going to be exposed to evil, negativity, and selfishness. Eisav in the Garden of Eden will build a most glorious world, a fantastic world with an economy, with commerce, with art, with literature, with medicine. Eisav would be the driving force in a world that's in a utopia where there's no evil. However, after the eating of the tree of knowledge, where good and evil are intermingled, where now we are subjective, now we are biased, now our selfishness plays a role, the world of Tohu is dangerous. It can collapse. It has no structure, it will have no purpose, and ultimately it's going to destroy itself. It would be an animal soul on steroids. It's not going to work. The world after the eating from the tree of knowledge, Eisav would spiral out of control into corruption, selfishness, and violence. You wouldn't have the advantages of Tohu, you'd get the disadvantages. Yitzchak did not see evil. Yitzchak didn't experience evil. He was blind. He saw the spiritual qualities of Eisav and wanted to bless him. Rivka, on the other hand, she loved her son Eisav. It's her son. But she recognized he had evil within him. He was a murderer. He was a rapist. And he was a thief. And he saw how ultimately he would destroy the world. What is an example of what would have happened if Eisav got the blessings of Tohu? It would be like a person who has a brilliant idea for a business. Brilliant. But absolutely no business plan. So the person is burning through money. Just absolutely burning through money. The Tohu blessing would be to invest another $1 billion in the business and another $1 billion in the business. All you're doing is burning and destroying the money. It's not going to be productive at all. What did Rivka say? Rivka said, let Yaakov take the blessing. She dressed him up like Yaakov. She gave him the food like Yaakov. And he demonstrated that Yaakov can do it too. What did essentially she say? In the hands of Eisav, the blessing would lead to corruption. In the hands of Yaakov, Rivka demonstrated that Yaakov's ability to play a material role. In other words, this is exactly what God prophesied to Rivka. What did God say? The elder will serve the younger. If you can subdue the power of Tohu underneath the dominion of Tikkun, now we're knocking. Now we're working. Now we're productive, but we're productive with passion. From this story, right, we can really see how it's critical to study Torah with the mystical cosmic level. Otherwise, you're missing out so much of the story. This was not a family fight, Yitzchak, Rivka, fighting with their kids, Yaakov and Eisav, who hated each other, a stealing of blessings. Rather, this is the story of our life. This is the story of our struggles. Within us, there's a drive for Tohu. Within us, there's a drive for Tikkun as well. Both are necessary, right? Both are necessary. This is why the Torah tells us about Yitzchak's approach. This is answering, I think, at least one of the questions that we're answering. Why does the Torah tell us about Yitzchak's approach? Because we have to know and value Tohu. Tohu itself has a potential for good, but Tikkun has to be in firm control. And now we will conclude by answering the fabulous question that was asked by Avi, that I think was mentioned by Karen as well. Why the deception? Why does this all have to come about through deception? So this is the answer, right? On a practical level, there was no other way to do it. Yitzchak is the one who is giving the blessings. Yitzchak only saw the lofty Garden of Eden reality. Yitzchak only saw the benefits and the positive of Tohu, and he was going to give the blessing to Eisav, period. The only way for Yaakov to get it was to be deceptive, right? Simple, that's the only way. But now, Avi, we're going to blow your mind a little bit. We're going to blow your mind. Why did deception happen? Very simple. The serpent, the snake, his deception created a mixture of good and evil. It was the snake who ruined everything. Before the snake, the spiritual and the material were separate and distinct from each other. The serpent's deception caused an intermingling of the spiritual and the physical. They're blended together. The serpent corrupted the spiritual by bringing the material into it. The only way to negate that, you have to use the power of deception to bring the spiritual into the material, right? The deception of the snake, what did it do? It compromised spirituality. The deception of Yaakov is now going to compromise the material and bring the spirituality into it. So Yaakov's deception counteracted the serpent's deception. Let's go to text number 7. Mark, would you like to read text number 7 on page 94?
Sure.
Excellent.
Jacob's cunning was necessary in order to correct the sin of the tree of knowledge, which also came about through the cunning and enticement of the serpent, and which caused the coarsening of all the worlds and the intermingling of materialism and spirituality. To rectify this, Jacob turned the tables, drawing down spirituality and supernal power into materialism.
In Kabbalah, it says that Yaakov is a reincarnation of Adam. Rivka was a reincarnation of Eve. The whole story of Yaakov, Rivka, Yitzchak, and the blessings, it's a replay of Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge and and the snake. Right? They had to rectify the sin. The deception of the snake corrupted the spiritual. How do we win it back? Through the deception of Yaakov and Rivka, we corrupt the material. By bringing the material over to the side of Yaakov, to the world of Tikkun, in order that we can influence it. All right, what is the takeaway from all this? What's the bottom line, right? Again, this is so beautiful and so deep and so powerful. What is the bottom line? What is the internal relevance of this story in our life today? We'll understand it with a simple question. Question number one, should we care about material success? And I'm asking you this question from the idealist Jewish perspective. Should we care about material? Do you teach your kids that the most important thing in life is the physical and material success? Absolutely not. No way. However, is it possible to succeed in business or in any endeavor requiring material resources if you don't care about it? No. There is no way that you can teach your child, don't care about the material, don't care about success, and also run a really good business. They're two completely conflicting ideas. This was exactly Yaakov's problem. When Rivka said to Yaakov, go get the blessings of Eisav, Yaakov was like, wait a minute. I'm the person who doesn't care about materialism. I'm the person who doesn't care about the physical. Now you want me to get Eisav's blessing? You want me somehow to go to work? This is the story of our lives. Every time we as Jews have to engage with the physical and material world, what are we doing? We are Yaakov dressing up in Eisav's clothing. Because we are Yaakov. We are Tikkun. We are spirituality. We are selflessness. We're about morals. We're about ethics. We're not about the physical and the material. But we must pursue the material. We must pursue the physical. We have to live in this world and we have to build it. But it has to be with a spiritual drive. So what's the solution? How does a Jew orient himself? How does a Jew live in this world? We have to remember that a Jew is Yaakov. The voice is the voice of Yaakov. The hands are the hands of Eisav. When we have to interact in the material world, we're only dressing up in the clothes of Eisav. We're not pursuing the physical and material because we like power and we like wealth. We pursue power because with power we can influence the world to be more kind, to be more just, to be more moral, and to be more ethical. We pursue the material and wealth. Why? Because of all the good and the tzedakah and the positivity that we can do with it. Who are we at heart? We are Yaakov. But in order to affect the world, we have to dress up in the clothes of Eisav. The key points.
Lesson 3, Jacob and Esau. 1. The two kingdoms embodied by the biblical Jacob and Esau exist on many levels. As the historic nations of Judea and Rome, as the spiritual and material perspectives on life, as the altruistic and selfish instincts in the human psyche, and as the cosmic worlds of Tikkun and Tohu. 2. Everything is composed of light and vessels, the pure energy of the thing and the structures and the mechanisms through which it operates. But there are two models of existence. The Tikkun model is one of scant light and abundant vessels, meaning that the vessels contain and focus their energies. In the Tohu model, there is abundant light and scant vessels, meaning that the driving energy is constantly bursting free of the structures through which it is meant to operate. 3. Each model has its advantages and disadvantages. Tikkun is harmonious and orderly, but constrained. Tohu is innovative and limit-breaking, but also strife-ridden and unstable. An additional disadvantage to the Tohu model is that it is prone to corruption, resulting either in the dissipation of its energies or in their exploitation by evil. 4. Because Tohu preceded Tikkun, we can tap the advantages of both models, drawing on the powerful Tohu elements present in our Tikkun reality as remnants of an earlier world. But this is also the reason that the Jacob in us, our instincts for spirituality and altruism, faces an uphill battle in its efforts to master the more primordial Tohu forces in our eternal Esau, the unbridled passions of the animal soul, the uncontainable force of the human ego, and the unsatisfiable ambitions of a materialistic life. 5. Isaac believed that Tohu and Tikkun could coexist side by side, each blessed with resources to fully develop its realm in accordance with the divine plan for creation. Rebekah, however, understood that the material world that is ruled by materialists will not rise to its true purpose, but will descend into corruption. The powerful resources of Tohu can only be redeemed when Jacob is made master of Esau. 6. In our own lives, we need to internalize both sides of the Isaac-Rebekah argument. Like Isaac, we need to recognize the powerful potential for good that lies in our Tohu self. Like Rebekah, we need to understand that in order to properly utilize this potential, we have to place our Tikkun self firmly in control of our lives. 7. Every time we interact with the material world, we reenact the drama of the stolen blessings. We become a spiritual Jacob who assumes the guise of a materialistic Esau in caring about the material success for the ulterior motive of making our world a holier, more godly place.
All right, I apologize for going so over time. I know it's difficult to do so on Zoom, but I hope that you found it worthwhile because there's so much depth in this class. And as I said before, it truly blows your mind. But I have one last comment to make. It'll take just a second. And this is addresses a point that Avi made so beautifully. Avi said before, deception, feh, right? This isn't Jewish. So I explained why there had to be deception and how it rectified the snake's deception. However, Avi, you're 100% right. Deception is feh, and there's consequences. Deception is not appropriate because Rivka and Yaakov were deceptive. There were consequences. You may remember that what did Rivka say when Yaakov was nervous? Don't worry, the curse will be on me. That's what Rivka said. In next week's class, you will see the negative consequences of the deception because deception always brings negative consequences. To explore this lesson further, myjli.com/Bible, more lectures, classes, texts that will enhance what we've studied so far. Next week, Tuesday night at 7:30, we're going to be having a special lecture with my father. Multiple Chabad houses are gathering together, so we'll have a big crowd. And my father from Florida is going to be the guest speaker. So look for the email with the link and the information for that next week. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. It was a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed. I am recording it, so therefore the link will be sent to you and you could watch it again and share it with your friends as many times as you like.